Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Amateur Radio Technician class, session number 2. So this is our agenda for today. We will discuss the previous session's coverage. We'll talk about the curriculum, where we are. We will also discuss, again, the practice exams. We will deal with our Q&A, the unanswered questions from our previous session. And then we'll begin the actual teaching with the first topic, electrical principles. And then we will do a question pool review. That is, we will deal with the questions related to the theory that we covered in today's class. Okay, so last session we discussed the logistics of the class, how it will flow. We talked a bit about the course itself, what it is. We got an introduction to your facilitator. We had a couple of slides talking about React, the organization. We also went a bit into what amateur radio was about, and we talked about World Amateur Radio Day that was celebrated on the 18th of this month. We talked a bit about the classes of licenses available in amateur radio. Then we went a bit into what our learning objectives and details of the curriculum. We also talked about our sessions that we'll be having. We went through a bit of the course material that we'll be using. And also we talked about some of the optional texts that are available should participants choose to purchase. We also went a bit into discussing about the exams themselves. We took a look at the licensing procedures in the US as well in Trinidad and Tobago. We dealt with a couple of frequently asked questions. Those were some of the questions when persons registered for the course they asked, so we dealt with those right away. And then we took a quick look at the course material itself. So in terms of our curriculum, this is a slide you will see for every session. It gives us an idea of our curriculum and where we are at any point in time. So as we go through the various weeks, we should see this yellow arrow move down as we progress and complete the various topics. So today we begin with electrical principles. Just a reminder about the practice exams. It is never too early to begin taking practice tests. These are the URLs or the links available to participants. You can use these links to set up your own exam. It's a practice test, and it will give you an idea of where you are at any point in time. So you don't have to wait to do these practice tests. It's highly encouraged, even from before we actually went into any tuition. So you could take the practice exams and see, you may very well find that you know quite a bit of the material already from prior knowledge, or it at least gives you an idea of the questions in the question pool. So you will have an idea of the knowledge that you will require to be able to answer the questions. Okay, so we had a question, a very good question coming out of the last session, and a couple of persons asked similar questions. So just chose one of them that was actually sent in via email. And the question basically goes like this. Do the questions in the general class, now the general class is the next level, right? So right now we are doing the technician class level. The next class up will be the general class, and of course then there's the amateur extra class. The question was, do the questions in the general class come from the same question pool as the technician class? And the answer is no. And we'll just rehash one of the slides, and we also added an additional slide that will hopefully give a little idea about the classes of licenses and the exams and what you will obtain when you sit those particular exams. So this is a slide from the last session where we looked at the various classes of licenses. So we have the technician class, the general class, and the extra class. So what we are tackling in these sessions, the next 15, 16 or so sessions will be the technician class. If you want to refer, you can think of it as the first level in the FCC system. And for that level, there are about 400, actually 412 questions in the question pool, of which you in the exam will get 35 of those questions to answer. But notice the other levels, the general level, the extra class level, a different quantity of questions in the pool. So whereas the technician only had about 400, the general has about 500, and the extra class has 700. And they are different questions. I mean, there may be a little overlap in one or two of the topics, and questions might be similar, but generally it's of increasing challenge and increased knowledge required. So the question pool to answer the specific questions are different between the technician, general, and extra as well. So the technician question pool that we are dealing with is specific to the technician. However, the knowledge builds. So to understand some of the material in the general class requires the prerequisite of the technician class knowledge. And of course, the exams as well. For you to do the general, you must have passed the technician class. So I hope that is helpful in answering the question that was asked. We have an additional slide that will hopefully give an idea of the various levels and compare the FCC system or the American system. And of course, Trinidad and Tobago, we have many participants from Trinidad and Tobago. Sorry, we are not able to put similar comparisons to the other. We have quite a few participants in the Caribbean and other countries around the world, and we unfortunately are not familiar with enough to be able to provide a sufficient comparison. However, hopefully this will give a gauge. So the American system or the FCC license, there are the three levels: the technician, general, and extra. You sit the technician class exam, you get a technician class license. You sit the general class exam as well, you get the general class license. And when you take the extra or the amateur extra class exam, you get an extra class license. So it builds like that. Reference to Trinidad and Tobago. So we have two classes of licenses currently. There used to be three. There was basic, general, and advanced. Now there are just two, basic and advanced. And how it matches, because the exams we are doing are the American exams, when you do the technician class exam, that certificate that you get allows you to apply for a basic class in Trinidad and Tobago. When you do the general, which is the next level up, so not the material that we're covering today, right after we complete the technician class, we will be offering the general class study. Once you complete the general class, you can then apply in Trinidad and Tobago for your advanced class license. So notice that's it as far as Trinidad and Tobago in terms of licensing. There's no additional license type. So the question often is, if I do my extra class, what extra do I get in Trinidad and Tobago? And the answer is nothing extra. You already have full privileges when you get your advanced class license in Trinidad and Tobago. So we do encourage persons who are interested to do the extra class. It's again additional study, additional material, good knowledge as we progress forward. However, no additional privileges for having gotten that. So hopefully this slide gives a little idea in a simple way of the three levels of the syllabus that we are doing here, the FCC syllabus. We are currently on the technician class syllabus. Afterwards, we'll offer the general class, and a couple months afterwards, we'll also offer the extra class. So hopefully participants will be encouraged to take all of these levels. And in Trinidad and Tobago, once you've got your technician, again, basic class license, the prefix will be 9Z3. That's the call sign that you'll be assigned by the Telecoms Authority. 9 Zulu 3 and letters following after will be your call sign. When you get your advanced class license in Trinidad and Tobago, you will have a 9Z4 or 9 Zulu 4 or a 9Y4 or 9 Yankee 4. That will be the prefix of the call sign. Once you become a licensed amateur radio operator, you get a call sign, and it will look like one of these. This is the prefix. The first three letters will be either 9Z3. In the case of basic class, if you have an advanced license, it will be 9Z4 or 9Y4, and then some letters. So for example, my license is an advanced class in Trinidad and Tobago, and my call sign is 9Y4R or 9 Yankee 4 Romeo. So hopefully that has helped. All right, so we're continuing a bit. This is a slide from the previous session, just to remind everyone, we would have distributed all of the documents that you are seeing on your screen. The no-nonsense guide, the question pool itself, Part 97 regulations, and a nice document called the Level 1 Technician License Syllabus. So all of these documents, all participants should have received in your email under session number 2. So if anyone has not, please either send me a WhatsApp, send me an email. Sometimes it gets deleted. If you can't find it, that's not a problem. Just let us know that you require it to be emailed to you again, and we will certainly facilitate. Do not hesitate. Don't think it's a bother. Please just raise a hand, in a sense, send an email or WhatsApp, and we'll be happy to facilitate. So, as far as optional material, again, to emphasize, highly recommended that persons purchase some of these manuals, at least one, if you can. These are the recommended ones. These are very good. There are, of course, many others. Please consider purchasing one of these from your favorite online store. Amazon will do. All of these are available. So please consider it's sometimes good to have a copy of the text. Good to look online, but some people like to have a printed copy that you scroll on, scratch up, highlight, and that sort of thing. So please feel free. But these are optional. You do not have to purchase any of these. It's really entirely up to you as a student. All right, so let's get into our material. So we are under electrical principles. That is our first topic. So therefore, out of necessity, we are going to be talking about electricity. So the question is, what exactly is electricity? So just bear in mind, folks, I'll declare up front that we will be, in tackling this material, we'll be using a lot of analogies to explain, to describe, to discuss, to talk about the material. And when it comes to electricity, we will be using water as an analogy. Yes, water. So while we are talking about electric circuits, we'll be referring to water circuits. Most of us are familiar with water. Most of us will have pipes running through our homes, water coming in, pipe-borne water, many of us will have. And in that usage, you will have taps that you will open and close. You may have a pump that will send the water pressure up. Let's say if you have a 2-story house or so, that is the analogy we'll be using in discussing electricity. Right. So what exactly is electricity? So it's the flow of something. It's the flow of particles, we could call it that. And the particles that flow are called electrons. So I always declare upfront to persons who have advanced knowledge, bear with us. We will be using a lot of analogies, and we will be using approximate language to understand the material. So persons will, of course, who are advanced, say, well, Robbie, electricity is really not the flow of particles, okay? So bear with us as we use these analogies to describe. It's a flow of something called electrons. And when we talk about the water circuit, we'll say in a water circuit, it's the flow of water. But in electricity, the thing that flows are called electrons. And the electrons flow in something, and it flows in what is called a conductor. We will discuss what a conductor is in a little bit. And that conductor might be wire. All of us should be familiar with wire, right? If you use a charger to charge your phone, that is wire. It's on the outside, you have an insulator. Yes, it might look like plastic or rubber, but inside you have wire, probably copper wire. So electricity is the flow of those particles that we're calling electrons inside of a wire. And in a sense, it's just like water will flow in a pipe or water will flow in a river. It's a flow of water in the case of a pipe that you get water from. But in the case of electricity and an electric circuit, it's the flow of something called electrons. And just in the same way that for your home water supply, you need a pathway for that water to flow. In the same way, in an electric circuit, you will have a pathway, and that pathway is the conductor, and that conductor is usually wire. And the electrons will move through the wire. Again, for persons with advanced knowledge, we'll say that is not quite accurate. That's all right, bear with us. We're trying to explain. So as the electrons move through that wire, it can do work. So for instance, when we see a light bulb, We turn on a light switch, and the light, you know, illuminates our area. That is work that those electrons are doing. And that is, we see the effects of electricity. Oftentimes, we cannot see electricity, but we see the effects of electricity. Certainly, we do see it when there's lightning. Where do we see it, right? So oftentimes it's invisible to us as it goes through the wires. We don't necessarily see it, but we'll see the effects of it. When we turn on that switch and the light lights up, we know electricity is present because we know it's there and it's doing work to illuminate, whether it's regular incandescent lamps or whether it's LED bulbs. We know it's electricity that's making all of that happen. So we say that electricity is like a river of electrons flowing through a wire. Just as in the case of your home water supply, it's a flow of water. So that's the analogy that we'll be using over the next several sessions or so, the use of water as an analogy. And in the same way that in your pipe, you don't want water to flow all of the time, do you? So you use a tap, and that tap, you turn it on or you open the tap, and then water will flow. And when you no longer require water to flow, let's say into a glass, you will turn off the water supply. You will take that tap and turn it off. In the same way, you have the equivalent in the electricity side of it. That may be a switch. You will turn on the switch or you close the switch. And when that happens, electricity will flow and something will come on. Maybe it's a light. Maybe it's some other device that you have when you close that switch or you press that button to say on. And when you open the switch or you switch the item off, the electricity stops flowing and therefore the item goes off. So in the same way with water, you open the tap, you close the tap. And of course, in a sense, you have taps that you could have partially open, you can have it fully open, you can have it almost closed, you can have a little bit, a little drip, you can have a full flow of water. In the same way with electricity, you have devices, we'll call them resistors, that can be variable and we can open it up, have more flow of electricity, less flow of electricity. So electricity essentially is the flow of electrons in a conductor such as a wire, and it can do work. And what we do to represent that, because we're doing amateur radio, we are very much interested in electric circuits, and those circuits are represented by a diagram. So on the right-hand side, you're probably wondering, what are these cryptic looking things here? Well, they are electric circuits or wiring diagrams, and they're very basic circuits. We have two of them. We have one on top and one below. And we will come a little more to what these circuits represent, what these symbols and these circuits represent in the additional slides as we go through. So again, we are dealing with electricity. Good. So we have a couple of let's say concepts really that we need to know about for the exams. And remember, in session number 1, we said we are doing light touch theory, sufficient information hopefully for us to understand the material, but we are exam focused, laser focused on the exams. So let's get straight into a couple of concepts that will appear on your exam. And that is the concept of voltage and current. So the question is, what is voltage and what is current? We are probably accustomed to hearing the terms. For example, in Trinidad and Tobago, whenever we have a loss of supply, a loss of electrical supply, you'll hear someone say, current gone. That's what we will say colloquially, right? So we are saying that there's no flow of electricity and say current is gone. But we need to know and understand what some of these terms are and what they mean. So the first term that we want to deal with is the term called voltage. So many of us would have heard of the term voltage. So you will see most of us, certainly in the US and Trinidad and Tobago and several other territories, you will see that your supply that you have in your house may be 110, 115, 127, some kind of 115 volts, one of those values. And we'll say the voltage is 117 volts. What does that mean exactly? We know it's 117. We know that we can only plug devices into the outlet that requires that voltage. We cannot plug something into it that requires a lower voltage or a higher voltage per se, unless it can take it. So we need to understand what voltage is as amateur radio operators. And remember, we talked about the analogy of using water circuit to describe our what we're talking about, the concept. We will use the water circuit again. So voltage in the electrical circuit or in the electric circuit is like pressure in a water circuit. So, sometimes if you have a pump, you get very strong pressure. If you don't have a pump, you might have low pressure. Sometimes at certain times of the day, you will find you turn that tap fully open and you get a lot of water um, flowing very, very hard. And we say that's, high pressure. Sometimes maybe you turn it all the way open and it's dripping a little bit or it's just running. We say that's low pressure. So that's water. You have high pressure, low pressure. But in the case of electricity, that pressure is what we will call voltage. So you could think of voltage as the electrical pressure, right? In the same way you have water pressure, think of voltage like that, approximately for us to understand. Now, voltage is the electrical term for the force that causes the electrons to flow in a circuit. Now remember, we said in an electric circuit, what flows are electrons. So voltage is that term for the force that causes it to move. It is measured in volts. Again, voltage, so therefore the unit is the volt or volts. And we use the letter V for the unit. So V for volts. Note sometimes and quite often, and this is important for us as we go forward in the course, that voltage is sometimes called the electromotive force or EMF. And the letter that we will often use is the letter E. So let's not be confused when we see E instead of V, right? We will see a little while where we will use it. We'll tend to use E quite often. But note that another way to refer to that force, instead of just voltage, we can call it the electromotive force, or abbreviated EMF. And if you think about it, electromotive force, that's what we were talking about. It's electrons that's moving. Motive means to move. So the electrons are moving with a force, and that's the EMF. Again, voltage or electromotive force. For our purpose, we will think of it as being the same. So that's the first concept that we need to be familiar with as amateur radio operators. And this is a question you will get in the exam. What is voltage? Now we also need to know, remember when we said the thing that flows in an electric circuit are electrons, right? So the electrons are flowing. And what flows just in the same way, and if we think about it, we go to the river, we go to the beach, those of us who have access to the beach, and we'll see water flowing. And oftentimes we say, look at the current. The current is strong. Don't go into the water because you have a rip tide, you have a rip current, and you could get drowned. We talk about the current, and that's water that we're talking about. And when we think of what that current is, it's a pull. If we go into the water and that current pulls us, you see, the current is strong. And we're talking about water. Well, in the same way in the electric circuit, you have that flow and you have that current because it's a pull, it's a push, it's moving through the wire. And that flow of electrons, that flow itself is called the current. In the same way like water, we will refer to the current. Usually we won't talk about the current in a pipe, but at the beach, we'll say, look at the current. You could see the current, it's pulling people in, you see the waves, and there's a current. So in the same way, we could think of the beach and current, we can think of the flow of electrons in an electric circuit in the same way, and that is called the current. And it has a measurement. It is measured in amperes. So while voltage is measured in volts, or the electromotive force is measured in volts, the current, the flow itself, is measured in amperes, and we use the letter I. So we need to be familiar with these terms, what they mean, the symbols, and the units of measurement. On the right-hand side, we have the circuit that we showed you in the previous slide, but we have labeled them a little bit. So let's talk about this circuit. So this is an electric circuit. It's also a direct current circuit. We'll talk about what that means a little bit. So on the left-hand side of this, there's a symbol. This is a symbol for a battery, right? That's a symbol for a battery. Notice that there's a positive side of the battery and the other side is a negative side. There's this symbol below. We have shown the full symbol and we have even shown what a battery might look like. This is just one way a battery looks. So the battery, and we should probably all be familiar with what a battery is. We put a battery in our watch. We have a rechargeable battery. car battery, there's a battery combination of cells, and of course, that is a source of voltage, your battery, positive side, negative side. And then current will flow, and then there's a what we call conventional current that will flow in a particular direction. And because it flows in one direction, it's called that direct current. So it's flowing in this direction, it's moving, again, conventional current from positive to negative. So the electrons will leave the positive plate and make its way through the electric circuit and back to the other end. Electrons are flowing, and they flow in one direction in the circuit because it's a direct circuit, it's a battery. It's flowing through the circuit. So think of these lines as the wires of the circuit, but then you see this little zigzag here. This is a resistor or a resistance, or it could be a load. This could easily be a light bulb, some sort of device in there that is a load, and it may light up. So as the electrons go through the circuit, as it flows in the same way that water will flow through this circuit, it flows and it does work as it flows and it goes around. So notice the symbols here. We talked about two of them already. We have the electromotive force or the voltage associated with the battery. It sets up a potential difference and the electrons start to flow again from positive to negative because we're dealing with conventional current. It goes through, does work through the load. We'll talk about the resistor and the symbols in a little bit. But notice the flow here is the current that is flowing, and the current is given in amperes. And we said that it's I is the symbol and A is short for amperes. That's the unit. So this is a simple or basic electric circuit that represents voltage and current. Again, we note that in this circuit, the current is flowing in one direction because it's a battery with a positive and a negative terminal. And because it flows in one direction only, it's called direct current. We'll come a bit into something else where the current flows differently. But notice, direct current, electricity flows in one direction only. Okay, so we talked about direct current, and we are now coming to discuss alternating current. And we may be already familiar with alternating current or AC. That's what we use when we take a fan and plug it into the wall. That's alternating current, whether we knew it or not. So on the right-hand side, we have another circuit. Again, it's an electric circuit, but this time we are representing alternating current. So this symbol here for alternating current is our voltage source. So think of this as our receptacle outlet. Sometimes we call this the wall plug, right? But it's really called a receptacle outlet. This is what you will see on your wall in your home most likely. If you're from a different country that uses a different standard, that's okay. You'll see something like this. And you will plug your fan or other device, your kettle, into here. And that is your voltage source. So this is the symbol here for the voltage source. But notice the little wavering line here, because it's alternating current. And notice, whereas in the other diagram, we saw that the current flowed in one direction. In this diagram here, you will notice that the current actually flows in both directions, or can flow in both directions, this way as well as this way. Notice we have a load. Again, this load here looks, it could be a bulb, it's a resistor at the moment. We'll talk about what that is, but it's a load. When the current flows through the circuit, it will do work as it passes through the load. But with alternating current, it can change direction. It will flow in this direction and then quickly reverse and flow in this direction. That's why it's alternating current as opposed to direct current that we saw before. So think about it. You know, in a water circuit, your water will typically flow in one direction only, right? But in this electric circuit called alternating current, the water flows in both directions. The best analogy I can think of, you know, we have sometimes a washing machine and you have a spin cycle, and then you see when it agitates, you know, the washing machine goes in one direction and it spins the other direction and it goes back again. So in that way, that's kind of how it works. The electricity will flow in one direction and then flow in the other direction. That happens in the wire. So the current, and of course the voltage also, that comes out of your wall plug, or really called the receptacle outlet, is constantly changing direction, and therefore it is called alternating current. That's why it's called alternating, because it's changing direction. And the current itself alternates between the positive and negative directions. It goes one way and the next way. And by the way, this is an exam question. So up next, the question really is, we're saying that it's alternating. So it's going in one direction and then going in another direction, just like some washing machines, right? You'll see it spinning one way and the other way. But the question is, at what rate does it do that? So that happens at a very specific rate. For electricity in Trinidad and Tobago, that happens 60 times. In the United States, also 60 times a second. It alternates 60 times in 1 second. That's pretty fast, right? So we need to know for the exam that the number of times per second that an alternating current makes a complete cycle is called the frequency. And the frequency is given using the term hertz. So we have a diagram here. It shows the current alternating, really the voltage, right, is alternating between positive and negative. Positive cycle, negative cycle, because that's what we are defining as alternating current. It alternates between positive and negative. So it goes positive here and then goes negative. Goes positive, and it actually does that 60 times per second in the United States and Trinidad and Tobago. Our house supply is alternating current, or AC, 60 hertz. So we may have heard that before, 60 Hz, right? So at the end of the day, we need to learn this for exam, that the rate at which it alternates is called the frequency. And the unit of that frequency is called a hertz. And more on that as we go through the amateur radio course. That term hertz is important because it's frequency we're dealing with. And in amateur radio, we talk about radio transmissions. And of course, those radio transmissions will have a frequency. So you'll see as the knowledge builds how they all come together. So we'll probably tackle another slide or two, and then we'll take a 2-minute break and we'll come back. So let's just do another slide or two. Okay, so these series of diagrams hopefully will put in one place the difference between direct current and alternating current. On the right-hand side here, we have an electric circuit where you have a battery, positive pole, negative pole, and we know the current will only flow in one direction, so that's direct current. But we have a graph here, a voltage over time. Notice that the voltage doesn't change in direct current. It stays steady. On the bottom here, we have an alternating current circuit, an AC circuit. You have the AC source, just like our house supply. It goes in one direction and then it goes in the other direction, and so on, right? But notice the graph of the voltage over time. It's like this, what we call a sinusoidal waveform. So it goes positive and then negative, positive, negative. And as we go on in the course, we'll detail a little bit more about this. So at this level, we are just really showing that there's a difference between direct current and alternating current. So let us take a 2-minute break, everyone. We will probably take a little stretch, get some water, bathroom break, and we'll come back and pick up where we left off and continue. So 2-minute break, be back. Okay, so welcome back everyone. So let's just deal with a couple of questions in the chat before we continue. All right, so okay, Anthony is here. Great to have you. The cost of the text. Well, we have a couple of texts that we suggested. They vary from about 20 US to about 30 US. That's the range of the cost of the texts themselves. Each one, the pricing is different. You can just check on Amazon, search for the text that's recommended, and you will get the cost. So, good question there, Samuel. Right. So, yes, there are less privileges between the basic and advanced, definitely. So the basic class only has VHF and above, and the advanced has all of the frequencies. And that will become a lot clearer as we go through the course as to what is HF, what is VHF. But the simple answer is yes, there are privilege differences. And a power surge, really, well, it can mean different things, but usually it means that you have a nominal voltage, what the voltage usually is. So if it is normally 127 volts RMS, and it goes above that, for example, for a bit, that could be a surge. But you have different things. You have surges, you have swells, you have sags, you have spikes. There are different types of electrical disturbances. But all of us, we tend to lump everything and call them surges, right? So it really depends on what it is. But usually an anomaly, something different from what we are accustomed to. And you can have brownouts, you can have a complete outage as well. And sometimes when the electricity comes back, the supply, you might say, hey, that's a surge, right? Because it comes back a little stronger than it, would be nominally. So good questions there, Lundy. All right. No, Samuel, I'm not aware that any stores will necessarily have these texts. They also expire every 4 years, so I'm not sure that there are any booksellers that will stock them. I don't think so. All right. Okay, Ramzan, you're saying my audio is very low, so I do apologize. That should not be. I am hoping that it is a little better now. I will try to improve, but thanks for the feedback as well. Yeah, we'll attempt to improve that. Okay, great. So let's continue from where we left off and see how much progress we can make. Right, so we now come to talking about another concept in the triad. It's called resistance. So you would have noticed on the diagrams, we talked a bit about the battery, and we said, there's a little zigzag symbol. It's a resistor. It could be considered a load. It could be some sort of load inside of there. But what it represents, just in the same way in a water circuit, you may have a shut-off valve going from your water tank, for instance, or you may have a shut-off valve coming from the supply, the municipal supply. So you could think of this as a valve in the water circuit. It's a valve that you may turn on halfway, turn on fully, or have it fully closed. So in the electric circuit, the best analogy is a tap or a valve where you may open and close. You have the electronic equivalent of that. And what that does, it opposes the flow, just the same way a tap or valve will oppose the flow of water in a water circuit. A resistor or resistance will oppose the flow. As a matter of fact, the wire itself will have resistance. As the electrons move through the wire, there's resistance. And you can also insert a component in there that gives additional resistance. That could be a resistor, or it could be a light bulb. It could be some load in the circuit that offers resistance to the current flow. And we need to know that the unit of resistance is called the ohm. That is OHM. And it uses the Greek letter omega. All right, so there it is in the circuit, the resistance. Also note that we put both the direct current circuit where the flow is in one direction, and we also show the alternating current circuit where there's flow in both directions, so we can have resistance in both types of circuits, right? And note that the resistance will oppose the current flow in all types of current, whether it's direct current in this first diagram, or whether it's alternating current as in this other diagram, or also radio frequency current. And we'll come to more about what RF or radio frequency is. But note that there's resistance and it pushes back against the flow of those electrons and so on. Just as in a water circuit, your tap will resist the flow. You have resistance in circuits that will resist the flow as well. Now, there's a little diagram I like to share that shows, we have talked about voltage, we have talked about current, we have talked about resistance. So we said voltage or electromotive force is the volt. We have said that current flow is the ampere. It's oftentimes abbreviated as the amp. And of course, we have said resistance is the units being the ohm. So this is a cool little diagram that shows the relationship. So, voltage is trying to push here, current is trying to flow through the pipe, and you have Mr. Ohm here that is squeezing them, putting up a resistance. So it's a good diagram that tells us about the relationship between voltage, current, and resistance. All right, so let's talk a bit about conductors and insulators. We talked a bit about it a little earlier when we talked about the wire being a conductor, and we have an outer plastic or some sort of rubber in a wire as conductor and insulator. But let's talk a bit about it because we need to know these terms for the exams. So a conductor is any material that will allow electrons to flow through it quite easily with low resistance. That is what a conductor is. So think of it as metal, copper, aluminum, gold, silver. Those are conductors because it will conduct electricity and it will allow it to flow fairly smoothly through it. So those are conductors. Now, when we connect components in an electric circuit, we usually use wires, and those wires are made of metal. I mean, the fact that we're calling them wires. Metals are typically used, and the reason is because they are generally good conductors. And the reason that they are good conductors is because the metal itself, the material, has free electrons. Remember we said that electricity is the flow of electrons in a circuit? Well, if it is the metals have a lot of free electrons, then that suggests that electricity will flow relatively freer. So we have a little diagram here that shows conductors. You'll see a metal here, you'll have a battery, and it flows through, and the light bulb lights up very bright. We also need to know what an insulator is. Of course, the insulator is the opposite to conductor. It does not allow electricity to flow as freely, right? It actually resists the flow. So we say that the insulator is any material that resists the flow of electrons through it. And therefore, there is a high resistance, and therefore it will not conduct current well at all. So you have the conductor that will conduct it quite well, and you have the insulator that will not conduct the electricity well at all. So if you look at these two diagrams here, you will see a good conductor, and notice they have gold, silver, even salt water, copper, good conductors of electricity. And then we have insulators on the right-hand side. Notice there's a circuit here as well. There's an electric circuit. There's the battery, there's the light bulb, but there's a block of wood. Well, guess what? That wood will not conduct the electricity, and therefore that's the reason why the light bulb does not light. Notice on this side, it's very bright because you have steel on this side here, so it's a pretty good conductor. And we have insulators, rubber, plastic. But for our exam, we need to know that glass is a very good insulator or a bad conductor. So this is actually an exam question that you'll get. You'll ask you, what are good insulators? And you need to know glass. So all of these are good insulators, but in your exam, glass will be the answer that you're looking for. So understand the difference between good conductors and bad conductors or insulators. All right, so we now come to Ohm's law, right? So this is where we did say we have a little bit of basic maths in the course. So we're starting a little bit of the maths, right? So this is a formula that we need to learn, we need to know, and we will go through the formula. It's a very basic formula, but it's manipulated, and we also use it to calculate values. So let's talk about it. Ohm's law. What is Ohm's law? It establishes a relationship between the three things that we have talked about already in the course. We have talked about voltage or electromotive force. We have talked about current, and we have talked about resistance. So voltage in volts, current in amperes, and resistance in ohms. So those are the three things that we have talked about in the class so far. And there's a relationship between them. As a matter of fact, this little diagram that we showed you earlier, these three guys here, there's a relationship amongst them, right? So the whole thing about it is, once there's a relationship between these three things, if you know two of them, you could use it to calculate the third one. So any two that you know, you could calculate the third. So what is that magic formula? So the formula for Ohm's law is E is equal to I multiplied by R. That's the formula. But what is E? E is electromotive force that is given in volts. What is I? We said that I was the symbol for current given in amperes. And we said that R is we use it for resistance, and the units being ohms. So that is the basic relationship. E is equal to IR. Sometimes, some representations, and don't worry if you see it represented like that, you may see the formula as V is equal to I multiplied by R. But remember, we said that we will use E and V interchangeably because V is voltage and E is electromotive force, which is also in volts. So don't worry if you see V instead of E. Don't let that tie you up. But we will be using E in our course because that's the term that's used in the exam. So E is equal to I multiplied by R. That's like saying if you're buying 10 apples in the grocery and it's $2 for one apple, what is the price? So that's like saying price is equal to the quantity multiplied by the price. That is a simple formula. So we should not get tied up with this formula. All of us who may go to the grocery and buy something, we know there's a price for one and how many are there, and we multiply. So that is pretty much the formula. E is equal to I multiplied by R. But of course, things get a little more interesting because we said that if we knew two of them, we could calculate the third. So that gives rise to three equations in total. So if we had I and R, we could calculate E by saying E is equal to I multiplied by R. But what if we had R? Sorry, I say again, what if we did not have R and we knew E, we knew I? Well, through what we call algebraic manipulation, and we'll come with a little aid to memoir just now, how to remember this formula easier. But if we do a bit of algebra and we move the terms around, we'll get R is equal to E divided by I. So that's if we had E and we had I and we wanted to find out R. Similarly, what if we don't have I, but we have E and we have R? Well, this is the other way we represent the formula. I is equal to E divided by R. So the next slide, I promise you, will show us how do we extract all of these things from there. If we know algebra, we can do our own manipulation and figure it out from this formula. So if you want to learn one formula, learn this. E is equal to I multiplied by R. And you can work out the others as well. But I'll show you a little aid to memoir next slide. So this is called Amal's plate. Now the only reason this is called Amal's plate was because when I did physics back in school, my teacher his name was Harry Amal. And he taught us this simple technique. And since then, I've called it Amal's plate. And that's just because that was my teacher. But the point is, this is a little representation. Remember I said learn E is equal to IR? And if you learn that, anytime you come to trying to figure out, well, how do I, if I'm not familiar with algebra, how do I manipulate this to get one of the terms? So as long as you can remember E is equal to IR, and one way to remember it, so E, I, and R, if you think about it, they are in alphabetical order. So E comes first, then I, then R. So E is equal to IR. You know, if you get tied up, E is equal to IR. And if you draw a plate like this, you have a circle and you draw a line across and then you draw a line down. You divide the plate into three. You put the E on top and you put the I and the R next. So again, E is equal to IR. So to figure out any of the other terms, you just look at the plate. So I already know that E is equal to I multiplied by R because I at the same level as R. So E is equal to I multiplied by R. But what if I wanted to find out about what I is? I'll say I is equal to the other two terms. I is equal to E and then R. But notice that E is over R. So we have to say and conclude that I is equal to E divided by R. And the same way, if I wanted to find R, and I have this little plate here, E is equal to IR, but I don't know what R is. I draw the plate, and I see that R is equal to, well, there's E on top, and there's I below. So then I conclude R is equal to E divided by I. So that is one way to, if we're not familiar with algebra, to move terms around, what we call algebraic manipulation. This is a cool way to draw a little plate, learn E is equal to R, and then we can figure out the other equations by just looking at the plate and write them down from observing what the plate says. Also, just note that in the formula, we are either dividing or multiplying. There's never a subtract or a minus or a plus, right? So it's divide or multiply. Okay, so let's work a couple quick examples. So using Ohm's law, we want to find resistance. So this is exactly how the questions will come in the question pool, and we'll see if we have some time, we'll go through the actual questions in the question pool. What is the resistance of a circuit in which a current of 3 amperes flows when connected to 90 volts? Now that sounds like a long, complicated question, but notice that we have highlighted some key terms, right? We have dissected the question. They have said, what is the resistance? So you already know they are asking you for resistance. That means you need to find out R is equal to something. And you already know too, because it's resistance. The unit of resistance is ohms. So you already know that the answer is going to be in ohms. So resistance is what you want to find out. And they're giving you that the current is 3 amperes. That is I. I is the current, 3 amps. And then they're telling you it's connected to 90 volts. So that is E, the electromotive force. So they have given you 3 amps, 90 volts, and you want to find R. So if we were to look back at this Amos plate, R is equal to E divided by I. So I put that in. So I say R is equal to E divided by I. I put that down. And then I go and substitute for E and I. But I know what E is. E is the voltage, 90 volts. I know what I is. I is the current, which is 3 amperes. So E on top here is 90 volts. And I below is 3 amperes. So I come now to say R is equal to 90 divided by 3, or 90 over 3. And I just divide and I get 30 ohms. You can use a calculator, or you could do it manually. So notice the question and how we get the answer. We apply the information from the question into the correct version of the formula, and we get our answer. Let's do another example. Similar question. What is the resistance? They're asking us for the resistance. They're asking us for R. So we need R is equal to something. And they say that it's a circuit for which the applied voltage is 12 volts. Now they'll try and tie you up by changing how the question looks. But we have highlighted, we have dissected the question here for the important information. Resistance is what they want to find out. They're telling us and giving us the voltage is 12 volts. And they're also telling us that the current flow is 1.5 amperes. So again, we should already start to be comfortable. They are giving us three things. They're telling us what they want and the values for the other two. So we need a formula. R is equal to something. So we already have the voltage and we already have the current. We need to find the resistance. R is equal to E over I. Where did I get that? Using a mouse plate. R is equal to E divided by I. So we plug those into the formula. We're looking for E. What is E? E is the voltage, 12 volts. We plug that in. What is the current? The current is 1.5 amps. We stick that in there. So we have R is equal to 12 divided by 1.5. As we substitute those values, we plug it into the calculator. When you divide 12 by 1.5, you get 8 ohms, and that's the answer. And these are actual exam questions, by the way. Let's do a couple more quickly. What is the resistance of a circuit that draws 4 amperes from a 12-volt source? Again, same formula. R is equal to E over I. We want resistance. We know voltage. We know current. We plug those in. What is the voltage? They tell us 12-volt source. So we plug that into E. There's the 12. We need current. I. What is the current? It says draw 4 amperes. Now notice it didn't tell you it draws a current of 4 amperes. That's what they try to trick you up. But you know amperes is current. So we put 4 inside of the formula where I is. I is current. So it's 12 divided by 4. That's 3 ohms. So we see R is equal to 12 divided by 4. R is equal to 3 ohms. An actual exam question. Let's do another one. Now this is a bit different. They're asking us here, what is the current in a circuit with an applied voltage of 120 volts and a resistance of 80 ohms? So they're asking us for the current, and they have given us the voltage and the resistance. Guess what? We know we use our trusty plate. We want to find out the current. That's what they're asking. So we need a formula for current. I is equal to E over R, or I is equal to E divided by R. So we use that formula. I is equal to E over R. That's what we just figured out. We write that down, and then we substitute now. We are looking for E. What is E? E is the electromotive force, the voltage, and the voltage is 120. So we plug that into the formula here. We are looking for R. What is R? They gave us R. R is resistance, 80 ohms, 80. We plug that in, and we divide. So we have I is equal to 120 divided by 80. Put that into your calculator, 1.5 amps. Let's do another one. Right, similar question. What is the current? They want to find out what the current is through a 100 ohm resistor connected across 200 volts. So look again, same type of formula. We are getting the resistance, we're getting the voltage, we want to find the current. We use the formula as the last example. I is equal to E over R. How did I get that? I is what we want to find out, the current. The formula is E divided by R. That's how we got the formula. So E, which is the voltage, electromotive force, 200 volts. R is what? You guessed it, the resistance. They told us it's a 100 ohm resistor. So we plug those in. E is 200, I is 100. Divide, and we get 2 amps. 200 divided by 100 is 2. So the current, or I, is equal to 2 amperes. Let's do another one. What is the current through a 100 ohm resistor? Sorry, let's go again. Right. What is the current through a 24 ohm resistor connected across 240 volts? Well, we do the same thing. We got our formula, I is equal to E over R. What is E? They have given it to us, 240 volts. We plug that in. But this time, it's a 24 ohm resistor, and we're looking for R, 24 ohms. We plug that into the formula. I is equal to 240 divided by 24, and we get 10 amperes. So hopefully, this is giving us an idea of the use of Ohm's law. So let's go now and find one other formula. And I'm using V deliberately here, just to show you we can use V instead of E to substitute. So here's the question. What is the voltage across a 2 ohm resistor if a current of 0.5 ampere flows through it? Guess what? We are using Ohm's law formula again, and we learned it as E is equal to IR. But I've put it here as V is equal to IR, just to show you it's fine as well. You could write it that way. We know the current, do we? Yes, current of 0.5 amperes. We know the resistance, do we? Yes, they say it's 2 ohms. So we substitute into this formula, V is equal to IR, and we have V is equal to 0.5 multiplied by 2. When you calculate that, you get 1 volt. So therefore, the voltage is 1 volt. Let's do another question. What is the voltage across a 10 ohm resistor if a current of 1 ampere flows through it? So again, we have the current, they give it to us, and we have the resistance, they give it to us. So we have I and we have R. We simply plug it into the formula. V is equal to IR. The current is 1 amp. We see it here. And the resistance, R, is 10 ohms. We plug it in from the question. We multiply 10 by 1, 10 volts. Let's do another one. Right. Okay. What is the voltage of a 10 ohm resistor if a current of 2 amperes flows through it? Well, they have given us the resistance, they have given us the current. So we use the same Ohm's law formula. V is equal to IR. What is I? I is the current. 2 amperes. What is R? R is the resistance. 10 ohms. We plug that into the formula. 2 multiplied by 10. The answer is 20 volts. So we have run through these questions very quickly because it's a the same formula, just different values of voltage, resistance, and current. And all of these are actual exam questions. We have a couple of minutes, so let's just take a look at those questions in the actual question pool. Right. So this is what the actual question pool looks like. This is what you'll get in the exam. So let's look at the first question. What is the electrical term for the force that causes electron flow? So remember we said the force is like the pressure, and in the electric circuit, it's called the voltage. So again, directly from the course slides itself. Let's look at another question. Actual question pool question. What is the name of the flow of electrons in an electric circuit? So what is the name of the flow? And we learned that just like in a river, just like in the beach, when you have current, current is the flow. So the answer to this question is current. Next question. In the question pool, electrical current is measured in which of the following units? So what are they asking us here? Electrical current. And we know electrical current, symbol I, is measured, we learned today, that this is the ampere or amperes. So that's how they'll come with the questions in the question pools. These are actual questions. Let's go again. Next question. Which of the following describes alternating current? So they give you 4 choices, but the correct answer is current that alternates between positive and negative directions. Again, straight from our slides, that is what alternating current is. It is current that alternates between positive and negative. Notice the distractors or the wrong answers. They're telling you about a positive and 0 and all are correct and so on. But we know, as we have learned, that alternating current alternates between positive and negative directions. Next question. What describes the number of times per second that an alternating current makes a complete cycle? So we said that the alternating current goes in cycles positive to negative, and it does that several times per second. And that term that we use to describe it is frequency. The next question, what is the unit of frequency? And we said the unit is called the hertz. The wrong answers here, Henry, Farad, Tesla. We didn't deal with any of those, did we? So the correct answer is the hertz. Once you hear frequency, frequency is given in hertz. What are the units of electrical resistance? Well, let's look at the choices here. Did we talk about the Siemens? Did we talk about Mohs? Did we talk about coulombs? No. We learned today that the electrical resistance is given in the units called the ohms. And remember, the symbol is also omega, the Greek letter omega. So they are asking us questions about things we learned today. These are the actual exam questions that you will get. So very doable once we learn the material. Next question in the question pool. What type of current flow is opposed by resistance? Well, remember we said that no matter the type of current, it will be opposed by any resistance, whether it's direct current, alternating current, and radio frequency current. So that's why the answer is all these choices are correct, because today we learned that all types of current will be opposed once there's resistance in the circuit. All right, let's just do a couple more, and that should take us to the end of our session. Why are metals generally good conductors of electricity? And we had said because metals have free electrons, because remember, when current flows, it's electrons that flow, and metals have a lot of free electrons, and that's why they are good conductors. So that's the answer. They are generally good conductors because they have many free electrons. Look at the other choices, the wrong answers. They have high density. We didn't talk about that. They have many free protons. We didn't even talk about protons are. And of course, all these choices are correct and certainly wrong. So we learned today that metals are good conductors because they have many free electrons. All right. Next question in the question pool. Which of the following is a good electrical insulator? So I did mention this is a question in the question pool. They are looking for a good insulator. not a conductor, because the other choices there are actually good conductors. Copper, aluminum, mercury, those are very good conductors. So the only good insulator is glass. All right. So let us just finish up the questions in relation to the Ohm's law calculations that we did here. We'll go through them quickly because we went through them in the slides. So the first question is, what formula is used to calculate voltage? That's the Ohm law's formula. And we learned that E is equal to I multiplied by R. So we just need to learn that formula. Now they will go and ask you those questions in a different way again about Ohm's law. They will ask you, what is the formula used to calculate resistance in a circuit? Well, the correct answer is R is equal to E over I. That's why that Amau's plate could come in very handy. If I were you in the exam, the first thing I'll go, you'll have paper, you'll have pencil. The first thing I'll do as I get and sit down in the exam is to draw a mouse plate. So when these questions come, I just look at it and I'll be able to answer it and also do the calculations. Right? Or the other way is, of course, you learn the basic Ohm's law formula and use algebraic manipulation to derive the other forms. Next question. What is the formula used to calculate current in the circuit? So they want the form I is equal to something. So again, from Amau's plate or algebraic manipulation, we know that I is equal to E divided by R. Let's do the calculation questions quickly. What is the resistance of a circuit in which the current of 3 amperes flows when connected to 90 volts? We just did that in the slides, right? The only difference is that in this slide, we actually showed the calculation, and on the question pool, they have the wrong answer. So you see how they'll try to tie you up. When you calculate it, you'll get 30 ohms. Another question we just dealt with in the slides, what is the resistance of a circuit for which the applied voltage is 12 volts and the current is 1.5 amperes? When we calculated it, we got 8 ohms, right? What is the resistance of a circuit that draws 4 amperes from a 12 volt source? So again, they ask us for resistance and they give us the current, they give us the voltage. Again, using the correct formula, R is equal to E divided by I, we will get 3 ohms. Next question, Ohm's law formula again. What is the current in a circuit when the applied voltage is 120 volts and the resistance is 80 ohms? Again, we use the format I is equal to something because we want current, and I is equal to E divided by R. When we plug 120 volts and 80 ohms into the formula, we get 1.5 amperes. Next question in the question pool. What is the current through a 100 ohm resistor connected across 200 volts? Well, they're asking us for the current, so same format of the Ohm's law formula. I is equal to something. I is equal to E divided by R. They give us E, which is 200 volts. They give us R, which is 100 ohms. We divide that and we get 2. 2 what? 2 amperes, because it's current that they want to find us about. Okay. What is the current through a 24 ohm resistor across 240 volts? Again, they're asking what is the current. So therefore, we need the I is equal to something. Current is equal to something. Current is equal to voltage divided by resistance, or E divided by R. We plug those into the formula and we'll get 10. Again, we just did all of these questions on the slide deck. So if you need a revision, you can take a look at the slide deck when we send it out or the recording. So let's just finish these last 3 questions, and I think that's it for the question pool. And we look to wrap up. What is the voltage across a 2 ohm resistor if a current of 0.5 amperes flows through it? Again, they're asking us what is the voltage. So we need the format. Voltage is equal to something. So I would have used V is equal to IR in our calculation, but remember E is equal to IR. It's interchangeable. So that's the format. They give us the voltage. Sorry, they want the voltage. They gave us the current, and they gave us the resistance. So we know V is equal to IR, or E is equal to IR. We multiply it, and we get 1 volt. What is the voltage across a 10 ohm resistor if a current of 1 ampere flows through it? Well, same formula again. E is equal to IR, or V is equal to IR. We multiply 10 by 1, and you get 10 volts. Hopefully this is all straightforward, folks. Last question. What is the voltage across a 10 ohm resistor if a current of 2 amperes flows through it? So they're asking us for voltage. Again, V is equal to IR. V is equal to the current multiplied by the resistance. Multiply 10 by 2 and you get 20. Okay, so that's it for the question pool. We just dealt with the questions related to all of the theory we did in today's class. So before we close today's session, I just want to mention, I think most of the persons in this course may have an interest in weather. So REACT, in partnership with the ODPM and TEMA, will be hosting a webinar coming up in the month of May. So save the date, Saturday the 13th of May, 2023, 6 p.m. We will be announcing further information about it, but it should be a pretty interesting webinar. We have some really good distinguished speakers in the lineup on your screen. So you're invited to attend, and we will provide further updates in the various, as we go along with the course. Please save the date. So up on the screen is the contact information. You have my email address and also the mobile or WhatsApp number. Please feel free to reach out should you have any questions. And note that our next session will be next week, Friday at 8:30 p.m. That's Friday, the 28th of April, 2023, 8:30 p.m. So thank you very much, everyone. Do appreciate you being in the class, being attentive, and we will be sending out the recording once it sticks, as well as the slide deck, so that you can review at your own pace all of the material that we would have covered. So everyone, thanks very much. Be safe and take good care.